It's just living in this world of constant urgency, shuffling things around without actually getting any work done. Because I think so many people have lost even the definition of what work means. What does it mean to actually do work?
Hey there, I'm Matt Diavella, and welcome to my short form podcast, 3 Rules. Each episode, I ask a guest to share 3 rules that help them find success and happiness. Today, I'm joined by Sam Corcos, CEO and co-founder of Levels, a company helping people better understand their metabolic health through real-time data. Sam takes a counterintuitive approach to both work and life. Rejecting the always busy CEO stereotype, he schedules his days for deep focus, while also being very intentional about his media diet. Whether you're an entrepreneur or not, I think you're going to find a lot of value from Sam's rules. Let's start off with rule number 1 for you.
Rule number 1 is don't let urgency determine priority. It's a useful way to think about problems. And what I found is that certainly in my past, and a lot of people that I know are basically trapped in the urgent category. Sometimes urgent important, sometimes urgent not important, usually urgent not important. Where something feels urgent, it just by default will override anything that you are doing because it has to be done with a deadline. A very specific recent example for us, I had a reporter reach out to us for a quote related to our space and glucose monitoring and said, I need you to respond to this within 24 hours. And I said, no, thank you. Because, it's a large publication, but media is not part of our strategy. So while there's this artificial constraint of, hey, you need to do this within 24 hours, I don't actually have to. So I'm going to focus on what's important. Media was part of our strategy a few years ago. It's not right now. So it's better to just not respond and focus on what's actually important. One of the practices that I have for this, which I found really helpful, every quarter, I try to do a think week where I stole this from Bill Gates, where I spend 1 week per quarter not plugged into communications, just thinking and writing. He mostly does reading, but I do a lot more writing in mine. A lot of my best work, a lot of the strategy documents that have led our path on this company have come from those think weeks. It's oftentimes I found it's not until day 3 or 4 of being disconnected from the day-to-day of the hyperactive hive mind that I'm actually able to come up with new ideas and think more clearly about where we're heading. Otherwise, you just get fixated on what is immediately in front of you. So, not letting urgency or whatever is the thing that's recent and directly in front of you determine what you pay attention to is really a critical one.
I imagine there are blanket no's that you have where you're just like, doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't matter how urgent it seems, your automatic response is no.
I think some of it is not necessarily even a blanket no, but I do add friction. So one thing that I have found really helpful is when somebody reaches out and they say, hey, I'm working on this new thing, I'd love to get your feedback on it. And I'll respond with something like, hey, I'm happy to help. I'm really constrained on my time right now for calls. So if it's okay with you, I'm happy to trade notes by email to start. And about 90% of people don't even bother following up with an email, which saves me a lot of time. Like if you're not even willing to put in the 5 minutes of effort that it would take to write down what you were hoping to get out of the conversation in an email, it was almost certainly going to be a waste of time in a phone call. So creating that friction and verifying that the other person is actually willing to put in the effort, I think helps a lot. That cuts down the noise. But I'm willing to help people in a lot of these circumstances, so it's not a blanket no.
I'm so glad that you gave this advice. It's very relevant right now because I have an email in my inbox where somebody wanted to get on a call, and I really felt like we didn't need the call. Like we could just, exchange notes via email. But it is I think it's the people pleaser in us that wants to, they say get on a call, so you're like, all right, yeah, let me find time to hop on a call. But I think you have to lean into that a little bit, like you said, and just, it may be a little bit uncomfortable to push back against somebody when they're really want to get on a call. They make it seem really urgent, make it seem really important, but there are ways to tactfully create a response that will kind of push that off your plate?
It's just living in this world of constant urgency, constant just shuffling things around without actually getting any work done. Because I think so many people have lost even the definition of what work means. What does it mean to actually do work? So that's it's so different in knowledge work, because when you're a mason, when you're doing masonry, like, you know what the output of your work is. When you're building a house, you expect to have a house at the end of it. In knowledge work, it can just be vaporware and nobody knows any different.
Let's move on to rule number 2.
Rule 2, you don't need to know everything. This is an interesting one because I think so much of people's attention is pulled in directions that are outside of their control. I think many people live their lives as the passengers, not as the drivers. I do my best to ensure that other people are not able to impose upon my attention, that I am the owner of my own attention, and that I choose what I put that attention on.
What are some ways that you remain intentionally ignorant?
I think the simplest one, because this is where most people get their information, is news. I've been news sober for 11 years, and the news is where most people get information, where they feel like they are staying informed. And the reality is most of that information has no connection at all to your day-to-day life. You also have no ability to influence it, and it changes your perception of the world in a way that's really unhealthy. So there's only so much time and attention. There are only so many things that we can learn. Our time is finite. This is a constant. My wife hates it when I say this, but she always says, I don't have time. And I say, you have the same amount of time as everyone else. You just choose not to prioritize it, which is okay. But let's not pretend like there just isn't time. People do things. We all have the same amount of time. We just choose what we want to do or not.
What media do you prioritize? Like, what are those, whether it's books or TV or news, what are the staples when it comes to your media diet?
It's almost entirely books. I think when I consider my consumption of information from outside sources, I do my best to read 2 books a week. I think I've averaged about 100 books a year for the last 11 years, ever since giving up the news. The books that I pick are typically books that were recommended by friends. So I have, whenever somebody recommends a book, I will add it to my Audible wish list. I do most of them as audiobooks now. And I've just found it such a convenient way when I'm in the middle of a workday and I have like an hour between meetings. In the previous world, I would have just sat around and done nothing, maybe watched the news, checked some website, checked the New York Times or something. And now I put on an audiobook and I go for a walk, and it's lovely. And I've actually been reading books on audiobooks for so long that my default reading speed is at 3.5x.
No, it's not. Are you joking? That's insane.
It sounds totally normal to me at this point because I've done so many of these. But to other people, it just sounds like chipmunks fighting.
Yeah, like, does having this regular speed conversation just like, it's like impossible for you to like slow down this much?
I will say that there have definitely been times when I've been in meetings live and I'm like looking for the button to make it go faster. And I'm like, oh wait, I'm in this meeting. Never mind. I have to like calm down. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I was going to say, because it's like that brings up another question that I was going to have. So you're consuming a lot of media through audiobooks. One of the challenges that I've had is that it tends not to be as sticky for me. So what are the things that you do if you're trying to take notes, implement some of the things that you've learned from audiobooks? How do you make sure that you don't lose track of those insights as they're flying by 3.5 times speed?
So part of the answer is I don't. That's the simplest answer. When there's a book, this happens with maybe 5-ish% of the books that I read. If there's a book that I read, and it's just like, wow, that one had so much content in it that I need to turn that into actions in my life, I'll buy the physical copy after reading the audiobook. I accept that maybe my comprehension is 80 or 90%. of what it would be if I did the physical book. But I've done this experiment, and my actual the amount of content that I'm able to ingest is at least 5 times greater with the audiobooks, just because I can do it while I'm driving. I can do it while I'm on a walk. It's just those flex times when I can consume it, and I can listen to it on an airplane, whatever it is. It's just so much easier to get that information in. So my comprehension is probably marginally less by doing audiobooks, but when I have a really good one, I'll buy the physical copy and I'll mark it up.
I'm going to be back with the third and final rule in a moment, but first, one of the ways I'm supporting this podcast is through Patreon. By becoming a patron, you get access to the full unedited episodes of the show.
A lot of people have forgotten what it actually means to do work, especially younger people who legitimately believe, they wouldn't be able to articulate this, but they actually believe that their job is to make sure that their green status icon on Slack is always green.
As a patron, you'll also get additional unused footage from my YouTube videos and access to a members-only area where you can ask me questions for my Patreon-exclusive AMA podcast. And most importantly, you'll feel good knowing that you're supporting a creator you like. And really, what other incentive do you need? Simply go to patreon.com/MattDiavella to support the show. That's patreon.com/MattDiavella. There's a link down in the description below. Thanks for considering. Let's move on to rule number 3.
So rule number 3 is similar, which is only give your attention to things you can control. So much of my life, I was worried about things that I had no control over. I would focus my attention on trying to network with people who I didn't know, but who I thought would be good people to know. I spent all this time on things that were outside and not focusing enough inside on the things that are immediately in front of me that I can actually influence. And ever since I changed to focusing on that, my life has been a lot better. My friendships are a lot deeper. I think stress, broadly speaking, goes down when you just let go of things that you have no control over. Whatever's going on, this is another fascinating thing that almost nobody can name their local representative in government. Almost nobody. And that person has way more of an effect on your life than whoever the president is. And yet people don't seem to know or care. We're focused on national things like it's a team sport, like we're watching football or something. But the things that actually impact us are local, and people spend very little time thinking about that.
What are the big things in your life that you found you can control to help improve your life?
If you only have 24 hours in a day and you want to sleep, which means you have about 16 hours a day of attention, which is actually not very much. And if you want to spend 2 or 3 hours of that getting angry about things that are happening elsewhere that you can't control, or you can spend 3 hours a day with your wife and child building a happy marriage. It's pretty obvious which one you should choose, but empirically, most people choose the wrong one. So it just feels like, but you have to be a responsible citizen, so you have to do those things. You actually don't. I think people take these things as assumptions, like you have to do them, but you actually have agency here. There was a moment when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, when I had this vivid recognition that I was not driving my own life. I was the passenger. I was just letting events take me. Whatever was directly in front of me, that's the way that I would go. And I had to take a pause. I took a year off work and thought a lot about what do I want to do with my time. And that helped a lot. It's certainly a privilege to be able to take time off, a year in particular, to think about these things. But it helped orient the way that I think about the world, and focusing on things that I can actually influence, that I want to make the change in the world. So I think it's anyone who can do it, I think it's really, really beneficial to take that time to think about it.
It sounds like reflection is just a really important thing that you found in your life, whether it's for 1 year or if it's for a weekend retreat where you go away by yourself and just write. It seems like constantly kind of coming back to basic principles and trying to understand in the busyness of life, what is important now, because things often change. Our lives change a lot. You become parents, you change jobs, and constantly reflecting seems to help. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a real pleasure. If people want to learn more about your work, your company, and what you do, where should we send them?
I'm just on X at Sam Corcos.
Thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in to 3 Rules. Want to see every rule from the show? Get the full archive at mattdiavella.com/3rules. For my weekly bite-sized self-development emails where I share insightful lessons, practical tips, and personal experiments, sign up at mattdiavella.com/newsletter. And if you want to learn more about today's guest, check out the description for this episode. See you next time.